Okay, so now I've got these elements. I've treated them. I've messed with their lighting individually. I've messed with their coloring individually. There are little areas that still bug me that I can go in, like the ear layer has this little chin strap of yellow fur that I might go in with the sponge tool and desaturate a little bit. Because I like the lightness of the fur there, but I don't like how yellow it is. Oh, I'm on the wrong layer. There we go. So there's lots of little refinements we can do. And then a little bit of internal erasing right there to help blend it. Let that shoulder fur come through a little bit more. All right, so now I'm trying to get rid of the outside stuff. I'm trying to cut this out like a perfect sticker, or a creature that I can then insert into any background. And so I'm going to start with the arms and all that green, and I'm just going to start with an eraser at 100% and let that gray really show through. And I could use a lasso as well. I just want to make sure I get all the little fragments. And if you're lucky, you'll have reference that has a pretty easily definable difference from the creature part that you want to keep. So this green is pretty different than the rest of it. But still, if I used the magic wand, there would be a lot that I couldn't control about it. So I'm just going to be really direct. So now that I've done a rough cut, now I go in, I'm going to save, and I'm going to do it by hand with the tablet, with the eraser, and for this, I'm going to do about a 60% hardness, smaller size, still pressure sensitive, at 100% opacity. And I just go in, and if I want individual hairs, I have to cut them out. But I don't want them to look green. Now, if I think I can use the magic wand with contiguous, or even without contiguous, as long as I only erase, I'm not going to hit delete, right? I'm only going to use the direct eraser. And so I can see how the wand works in little areas. But the reason I can't just use the magic wand and hit delete is because I don't know where else it will delete content. And that's very dangerous. So this is kind of a safe way to use the magic wand to help with your selections. You can still see the green kind of coming through the fur a little bit. So then I might decide to use the sponge tool and desaturate that edge a little. And now that looks very believable, right? And remember that gray background is emptiness. So that's going to work well on any background without any kind of debris out here. Before I move on to the head or anything else, I'm going to continue that with the rest of the arm. This is a little bit harder. I can't use the magic wand here because these are the same colors as these nails. But when I get to that green, I do feel like I can use the magic wand. The gray is a much nicer background than white because you can see the highlights and the shadows coming through. And we'll often do that. We'll often create just a temporary layer that we fill with middle gray so that we can really observe the work closely. And in our next project, we'll use a layer that starts with middle gray as an overlay layer. to do dodging and burning on our landscape in order to put shadows underneath the creatures we bring in. So being comfortable with middle gray is helpful. I can even kind of shape these nails a little bit to my own desires. Okay, now I've got a lot of green, so now I can try that magic wand trick. I have it at a tolerance of 32, which is the default. But notice it's getting kind of chunky, so if I think I can risk it, I can push that tolerance up. I'll try 44. Yeah, that seems to do a pretty good job. And now I erase by hand where I feel it's safe. But I know only the greens are selected. So I feel fairly protected. And then I'll clean up the rest individually. Okay, so Command D to deselect. So this leaves a lot of little debris for me, which can be a pain. If I go in and I'm very disciplined with my brush, my eraser, my tablet, I can take it all back. So in general, when you're doing fur, you want it to be softer edged than when you're doing things like nails. But I would never say that you should use a 100% hardness setting on an eraser when you're doing this kind of direct cutting out. So you always want just a little bit of feathering. And of course you can just, once you've cleaned it up, you could just cut it all out by using the magic wand and refine edge to soften it all. You see he's got little hairs on the top of his fingers I want to get as well. Using my shortcut of Command plus to zoom in, Command minus to zoom out. If I ever need to fit it all on the screen, Command 0. And this is the final touch-ups. If you think of this as assembling a car in different parts, now we're taking off all the protective tape and stenciling, and we're buffing it up and smoothing the rough edges, removing all this extra material we don't want. It's the detail work. It's what you have to pay extra for at the car wash. Now it can be hard to even know what you're looking at when you're so zoomed in, so don't get stuck that way. I want some of that fur coming around the hand there. Now this is tricky, but I do need to cut it out. So I'm going to use the magic wand again. I'm going to close the tolerance back to 32. And I'm going to use it where it's useful. I think it is on this outer rim here. Anything that's too close to green. But then a lot of it's just more subtle than I can deal with. So I helped out here. But as I get closer and closer to the edges, I'm going to find other ways to kind of simplify this. All this armpit hair, if you will. Okay, so that's one side. Because of the green, I'm going to head and use the sponge tool and desaturate the edge there. I have to do it after I cut it out, because otherwise it makes it harder to differentiate. Now we go to the other side. So you can see that's going to make a huge difference as we start cutting this out. And it should really feel like it all starts to come together. So for this, let me try the magic wand, see how that helps. Let's broaden it. Let's try 55 here. The green's pretty pronounced. It's too much. Let's try 44. Too much. Let's try, I guess, 32. I'll have to stick with the defaults. And then I can add to it, so I can add different greens by holding down Shift. Yeah, this is not the easiest thing to cut out, so I'm just going to do it by hand. And this is how you can do that. It takes practice, and of course you need a steady hand. But you can always go back in your history. Every time you lift up using the tablet, it saves another history step. So if I show you my history while I'm doing this, see each time I erase something and then lift up, it will add an eraser step, which means I can go back step by step if I ever erase something I need. So it's pretty safe. Doing this with the mouse is terrible because it's not pressure sensitive. But doing it with a tablet is about as stressful as like inking a drawing, trying to smoothly capture your outlines. And the best art always makes strong decisions. So sometimes you'll just decide, well, I don't want that fur there. I'm going to cut in. I'm going to shorten it. And the thing that's the most painful to cut out is fur like this. Really kind of spiky fur. Quilled feathers. Anything that has, it's kind of grass-like. But that's a texture you see in a lot of animals. So you see, I'm just getting close enough to it, getting rid of that kind of green sheen from around these areas, lifting up every once in a while. This actually might be a good place to try the quick selection tool. Since the magic wand wasn't selecting it very well, I can try the quick selection tool, which is above the magic wand, and you just kind of draw in an area. But you see it's dangerous because it jumps in and goes a little too far in a lot of places. So yeah, to me it's just not accurate enough. They keep improving it, but to me I like the magic wand a lot more. Now, other digital artists might approach this a different way. I know digital artists that do everything with the lasso tool. So instead of trying to do it as precisely with the direct eraser, they would just lasso and hold down Shift and Option to add to the selection, to subtract from it. But the reason I don't like that is you have to hit Refine Edge and do this whole thing to soften it before you delete it. And sometimes that can be hard to control. But it does work. So either method can work. I don't know if they've done side-by-side comparisons for what is faster. But basically you get faster at the things you use. So. Now I cut that fingernail down a little bit, but I'm fine with it. So I'm trying to make this all believable, but I'm also not trying to get swept up in the perfectionism of it. And then for all this outside stuff, instead of using my eraser, this I will use a lasso for, because I've given myself plenty of room to just delete it. And there's little debris that hangs out on the gray, you can see.